Gilbert Henderson Bates was a sergeant in the 1st Wisconsin Heavy Artillery Regiment during the Civil War. At that time, many Americans knew that Southerners had openly supported the Confederates during the Civil War. So in 1867, Bates was having a conversation with one of his neighbors who said, "Sergeant, the Southerners are rebels yet. They are worse now than they were during the war. They hate the Union flag. No man dare show that flag anywhere in the South except in the presence of our soldiers." To which Bates replied, "You are mistaken. I can carry that flag myself from the Mississippi all over the rebel states, alone and unarmed too." So his neighbors took him up on the bet. He was to travel from Vicksburg to Washington, D.C., arrive on or before Independence Day, 1868, and do it with no money and unarmed. If he succeeded, his friend would pay him the sum of $1 a day for every day of his trip. He arrived on the evening of January 24th, 1868. The next morning, Bates was greeted by a stream of visitors, including the town's most prominent citizens and a number of Northern soldiers stationed in the city. And on Bates' last day, a procession accompanied him out of the town, headed by the city fathers on horseback. Next came a band playing Tramp, Tramp, Tramp. Then came Bates and his flag, followed by thousands of town people in carriages or on foot. The procession terminated at the monument to General Pemberton and Grant. A short distance beyond, on the summit of a little hill, Bates turned and waved his banner to say goodbye. Cheer on cheer arose, he later wrote, till it almost awakened the dead echoes of the cannons that had roared about the spot in 1863. For a time he could hear the receding blare of the band's tramp, tramp, tramp. Gradually the music faded, and not without a certain feeling of sadness he would recall, "I pursued my solitary way." He traveled through drenching rains and a snowfall. The wagon roads were in fearful condition, so he took to walking on the railroad tracks. There were crowds to greet him at every station. A train was halted while its passengers got out to cheer him on. Quite often money was shoved into the sergeant's pockets. Some nights he spent with wealthy plantation owners, other nights in black country shacks. He would remember with special warmth a meal in the farm home of an Irish couple who greeted him as the Bold Boy and insisted on promptly pulling off his boots for him. At Hickory, Mississippi, he was serenaded one night by 50 men with a dozen fiddles and a keg of whiskey. In Alabama, an 8-year-old, hearing that Bates had a little daughter, gave him her newest doll and asked him to send it home. In Georgia, he found himself on a lonely stretch of road. Suddenly, he came upon a young farmer chopping wood. The farmer said he'd been watching for Bates. He wished to extend the hospitality of his home, 2 miles away. On their way to the house, the men stopped at a roadside mound where the farmer's brother was buried. He was killed fighting for the rebels. The farmer stood upon one side of the grave, Bates recalled, I upon the other. Unconsciously, we bared our heads. A plain wooden headboard marked the place. He reached me his hand over the grave of his brother. I clasped it in the deepest emotion. On April 8th, Bates crossed the Richmond and Danville Railroad Bridge into Richmond, where he found himself making his way through a crowd in front of the Exchange Hotel. That night he waved his flag from the top of what was only a few years earlier the capital of the Confederate States of America, while thousands cheered and the church bells pealed. Early on the morning of April 14th, he descended into Arlington Heights and across into Washington. Bates proceeded to the Capitol where he was to fly his flag, but he encountered some difficulty, so he proceeded to the still-to-be-completed Washington Monument. Bates clambered to the top of the unfinished monument and unfurled his flag while those below lifted their voices in tremendous cheer. His travels were widely reported in newspapers all across the country. Thousands of Confederate soldiers came out to shake his hand and salute the flag. Sergeant Bates would later make a similar bet in 1872 that he could walk the length of England in the same manner without being insulted. He won again, but instead of taking the $1,000 prize as planned, he sent a telegram to his friend from London that said, "Cancel wager. I regard this mission as something finer than a matter of money." He returned to America to become a fixture on the lecture circuit, giving rousing patriotic speeches and displaying his famous flag. Bates also joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows in 1886. He died in 1917 and was buried in Saybrook, Illinois. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to like it and feel free to comment. Also, you can subscribe below and check out other videos on this channel as well. I look forward to adding new content here, so check back soon.